Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira Khan, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together. Okay, so today we're joined with this beautiful woman, Diana Tokaji. She's a certified IYT, which is a yoga therapist of the International Association. She's got her master's degree in yoga therapy. She's a choreographer, a writer, and she leads experiential seminars and trainings for yoga teachers and psychotherapists who work with acute stage trauma. So welcome.
Well,
Diana.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. We've been having lots of fun emails the last week, getting to know each other. We're writing very long emails because we're both writers. We love to write. And so I would like to ask you about your yoga journey. When did it start, and when did it start to develop into yoga therapy?
Oh, when did it start? That's actually a great question. Because my father died very suddenly in his 50s, and it sent a shock through my system, and I found that I couldn't dance.
Mm.
I did not have the extroversion to go through technique classes with a mirror and etc. I just could not express myself in that way at that moment.
But you were a dancer then?
I was a dancer, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was a dancer, and I had already done years of what I considered to be yoga therapy, although there was no name that I had for it. That was maybe almost 45, 50 years ago.
Wow.
I'd been unable to walk, and no one could figure out why. And I started working alone by myself in a studio, sounding and exploring, and then studying photographs of me, photographs of my legs to try to understand, and gradually did understand, but then progress. So that was when I was 18, progress about 10 years, and my father suddenly died. He was my second parent to die.
Okay.
So that was a huge, huge blow. And I had gone back to college at San Francisco State University, and I pawed around in the PE catalog to see what they had to offer. And they had a yoga class, and it was taught by a man with a chest long beard, and who was, as it turned out, I didn't know there was any difference with one technique to another, but he was an integral yoga teacher, a student of Swami Satchidananda, and he taught a class where our eyes were closed. Our mats faced each other in 2 rows, but our eyes were closed the whole time. So there was no watching of each other. And it was really a haven where I could go, and the names were corpse pose or cobra, these animalistic things that conveyed a whole range of sensation. Mm-hmm. And I liked it so much that I went on to do a certification course with Swami Nischalananda, who later became Nischala Joy Devi.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
And so she was my first certification teacher.
Wow.
decades, very many decades ago.
Mhm.
And then I wasn't satisfied with that teaching. I didn't feel, knowing the physical problems I had been through, that did not seem like enough to be a trustworthy teacher of bodies that all had potentially different issues like I did. So then I went deep into studying Iyengar yoga at the San Francisco Institute.
Wow.
And then it just goes on from there for another 40 years. So I don't want to bore you, but I did become very respectful of structural
alignment,
information, and the keys to freedom that those can offer somebody, even though I also love the eyes closed inward movement.
So that is a trait of integral yoga, is that it's eyes closed?
I don't know that it is now, but that teacher did it that way.
Okay. Yeah. And the mats facing each other. I also got taught that way in Berlin. And it was very confrontational because we did have eyes open, but it also made you kind of face your fears of being opposite a stranger each time, which is
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we don't face each other's bums, but each other's faces. So I do it in my classes too, because we're so antisocial, I believe, and we fear to look at each other in the eye, that I think it's a good thing to kind of stimulate that in people, that it's okay to look a stranger in the eye and slowly get to know them.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I thought about, I read your article, very poignant, about the acute stage of trauma and assault. And I saw what you had written, your chair pose and the Tadasana, and that it's very alignment based, these tools. And I was like, this must be Iyengar. She must have done Iyengar. No?
Yeah, but those are not, those instructions to me are not alignment based. They are closed chain.
Yeah.
In this, and they are contact based. But to me,
I didn't mean I just meant the choice of poses, not so much the instructions of the pose, because how you then break it down is totally different.
So the choice of the poses is, if I can find it, you might even find it faster than me. Yes. The choice of the poses is based on the 10 elements that I recommend for after an assault, and I'll just list them. And this is what I teach in part 1 of my training. I'll just say them, and some will be maybe puzzling and require explanation, but others not. So this is for anybody in an acute stage. My beef is that we throw around the word PTSD, but we do so, you'll hear somebody speak that they have PTSD a week after a trauma, 3 days after a trauma, because that's the language that we have. And what I call it is, you are still in the assault, you're still in the trauma. And I think that PTSD suggests to our slightly narrowed thinking that we should already be in a healing state. We should already be in a recovery state. And I take issue with that we are in the state still manifesting the assault. Imagine like a burn, and how, well, the burn is finished, but the burn is continuing. Like the fire is no longer on you, but you have this resonant, right? So you know, the idea is not to immediately cover it and
put a bandage on it.
Right. So these elements are for the person in the present tense of an event. And to be fair, that can mean 15 years later, having resurged into an acute state. So these are vigilance, symmetry, narrow stance, because a wide stance is vulnerable.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that what it is? Yeah.
Knees parallel, because open legs is vulnerable. Closed kinetic chain, we can talk about that. Heels on the earth, quadriceps engaged, eyes open, head level, and protective mudra. And I would add to that maybe evoking a resource with your eyes so that what you're looking at that moment, even if it's a dot on the wall or the limb of a tree, you evoke that which will empower you, be it an elder's eyes, the eyes of your dog, someone who's passed away, a mountain that you love, water, whatever it be.
Is it about the point of safety? Something, when you speak of a resource, finding that safety, some reference point to come back to, grounding?
It's, it's so grounding. It's so about grounding that I almost don't even use the word grounding. I think of it as, I think of grounding for myself if I'm about to make a speech. But I think for the assault survivor, it is literally, with the best meaning of this word, tethering.
Yes, you've written about that.
Yes, so like a pole that's leaning, or we had a pine tree in the back that was completely half tipped and dying, and we roped it in and anchored it like you would a tent pole, right? That kind of tethering. So at this point, whether it's severe loss of a refugee or a physical assault on the street, it's beyond grounding to this real survival point of a tethering. Yeah.
Is it because someone who's in acute trauma, or the trauma comes back again and again, that grounding is too distant and they are so far away, or so, I don't know how you would call this, volatile or light, that tethering is a possibility, whereas grounding is just too far away?
It's semantics. I think grounding is fine. I'm just trying to evoke that I mean like super duper grounding. But what you said is really potent. So from a yoga therapy perspective, there are many points of language that we can use to describe an assault. And when I use the word assault, I use it very generously. So we can go back to what I mean by that in a minute. But to continue, an assault to the system, or to the body, or to the psyche, or to the moral code, sends us into a vata state for sure. It sends us into the ether. And as you might read in my book, at some points, I wanted to leave this earth after I was assaulted. I did not want to be part of this earth. So if you were describing that as vata, pitta, or kapha, it is vata, right?
Extreme vata, yeah.
Extreme vata. And you will hear, if you listen to your clients or you listen to a friend in trouble, you might hear vata type of language. I'm confused. I can't focus. I'm stumbling into things. or a client who is very conscious of her body saying, I just want to twirl, or I just want to, and even in a positive way, expressing this upward motion that she wants, and then kind of negotiating with her and saying, would it be okay if before you twirl, we squat low? We do in dance what's called a plie. And in yoga, it would be like a goddess, So is it okay if we if we go into that voice, When I was having my first child and I was working with a doula, she said to me at one point, lower your voice. I was screaming and she said, lower your voice. And I thought, I won't swear right here, but I thought, lady,
this is my job.
Lower my voice. But she was not saying be quiet. She was saying, take the melody down, take the tune down, take it into the tethering place. Go down toward the womb.
Okay.
Rather than, oh my God, right? Because from up there, she knew it could perpetuate hysteria. So that's a more vata place when you're up there. So anyway, so it's assault is super vata.
Yeah, disassociation, or do you find that too dismissive? Too clinical?
You win. You hit the jackpot. You get the refrigerator. I don't love that word.
No, I can imagine. Yes, it's very cold.
It's useful, I suppose, within professionals because we have to use language to understand each other. But I think you got it. It shoves everything into a basket and demoralizes the value of leaving your body. There are times when, fair enough, leave your body.
Yeah, you don't want to be there. You can't handle it psychologically. No.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's an invitation to
safety,
to come into safety, to our idea of safety, maybe really seriously, maybe for the person suffering the assault at that moment, the safest place is to be a balloon in the sky, and then maybe to just say at that point, I want you to know that I'm holding a little piece of the string with you, but you can be up there. Or I'm watching you. I have my eye on you. I want you to know I'm guarding the air for you as you're up there. So you can't fight the truth that the survivor is in.
No. Okay. I think we've jumped straight into your book and to the core of your teaching. So this is mainly what you teach in the trainings and the workshops. Do you do workshops or not?
I do training. I do workshops and presentations for conferences and groups of people, but I also have my own surviving assault yoga therapy as a complementary early intervention for the early stages following assault or trauma, a strength-focused approach. And, even beyond the word tethering that we said, or the embodiment that we just implied, is dropping into a taste. If you can evoke a taste within that body of power, which of course is grounding. So it covers lots of things, but of power, because that body or the psyche has many forms had to surrender to an overpowerment.
Yeah, it's been disempowered.
Completely. And there's the shame and the blame and the guilt that goes with that, and the disempowering. So that's why the first thing in the chart that you mentioned, that's in the article and also in the back of my book. Do you want me to just do a body piece so we put our bodies where our mouths are?
Yes, I'd love that.
So I'll do just the arms first, is Fasti Mudra. And a little background, I was looking through a bookshelf when I was in school, in graduate school, and pulled out a mudra book and opened it and leafed through and saw this, and I felt like it saved my life. So it's Fasti Mudra, which is, I'll just I'm only bringing them up high so you can see, but the forearms are crossed at a strong point, and the arms are therefore guarding the chest, but the palms are wide apart and pressing sideways. So you're protecting yourself from the sides as well. And then if you push, so people who are listening have their forearms crossed, and they can find a picture of this in my first book, the Surviving Assault book. Then if you push one forearm bone that's making an X with the other one, if you push one into the other, creating an isometric, start to notice, what do you feel through your torso back and front? And speak out and share, Shira.
So I feel the side of my body, especially underneath my armpits, the whole side chest, coming in, and it makes me feel really contained and strong and solid. The kind of feeling that you like to have when you need safety. It's a feeling I used to have. I remember one day I was sitting down. I'd been doing Kung Fu every day for about a year. I'd become very passionate about it. And I was sitting on my chair and I just felt so strong, so contained. And it was like I could take on the world in this position. And this is the kind of feeling it's creating. It's this internal strength and gathering.
Beautiful description. Yeah. And somebody else might feel this between their shoulder blades. And like you said, the latissimus dorsi and the abdominal muscles, you know, and like deep in the abdomen dropping into the pelvis. But then what if we add to that chair pose? So if I can eke up onto my feet, because I'm kneeling here. And if the listeners can come to their feet, you know, because talk is cheap, but coming into the body is really powerful. And even though you can't see me, I'll come close just so that the microphone is working. But I have my feet parallel, and that in itself is potent. And that was on my list. And then I'm exciting the quadriceps, but not just the quads, my butt muscles, right? My glutes are really drawn to strength, right? Almost as if the air was hot under them and I was jumping from there. And then if I get out of your sight of vision and your arms are crossed in svasti, and of course, if I'm talking too much and you need to come out, just take a breath, come out and go back in, but then choose a point of vision, and listener, evoke something that feeds you. Any instrument of life and strength and sweetness and goodness and belief in you. Be that in nature, something you love, be it the eyes of a dear one, alive or past. And take that in through your eyes into your mind, so your eyes are open at this moment. Your body is feeling its strength, your center and the earth and the heels and the anchoring through the good earth right into the core. And then when you come out, let your hands be just where they want to be, wherever they want to be. So what's interesting, well, maybe you share first, Shira.
So I felt very strong, and I loved what you said when you said, feel as if there's hot air underneath you, because you really want to lift up, but at the same time, you're pushing those heels into the floor. So it just intensifies the strength you have in the legs. And in Ayurveda, we say the legs are the earth, the feet are the earth. So it is getting into that earth element from the lower body. And then I felt, through these hands and the connection, and then that trying to embody that sense of safety, I just felt very whole and strong.
Yeah. And this can be used. So, for example, I'm sitting and writing my book, and the disbelief in my ability to do it is overwhelming, my passion to do it, and I'm starting to deplete. And those voices are definitely assaultive to my life force at that moment, my creativity. Or I'm opening the refrigerator and I say, let's eat such and such. And then a voice says, no, you little shit, don't be eating that. I'm trying to capture these little moments that sabotage us. So if I catch that and I quickly, Svasti, look at what that feels like. If I quickly cross my forearms and I give that a dirty look and I power back at that power. So those are very small instances, but these moments of disempowering can be habitual and are equally important to the super take you down assaults.
Yeah.
And there are other ones in the fourth mudra in my Surviving Assault book is sometimes called Ganesha, where your hands are in Namaste. And then you just pivot them, keeping the palms together. So you turn them until they're sideways, horizontal, and then slide them backwards like that little toy that hooks until your fingers hook into each other. And then lay that maybe around the solar plexus or on your lap if you prefer. And now take a breath in and pull in opposition and feel what ignites in your center.
Yeah.
So as you said, in terms of creating safety, like even writing a terrifying book to write, owning that energy and then powering it through the body in this way can really open the breath in a non-didactic way. And create a physiological, psychophysiological, neuropsychophysiological message through the system of feeling within and strength.
I think that's key, is the embodiment of strength. Because when you dissociate, you're out of your body and there is no strength. You're ethereal. So this is also something I've come across in my practice, in my teaching, and in my life, that it was so essential to find that strength and to embody strength, embody power. And that's why I use emotions a lot, is because emotion, we say, Sanskrit word for it is rasa, and rasa means juice. It means flow, fluidity, according to context. So it's there's something that you're feeling, but it's still moving, and you want to embody that power. So I also think it's not just about bringing people into a space of calm, because when you don't feel strong and empowered, you cannot get to calm. You're not safe to come to a calm space. We need to first get that person to feel strong and capable to be in whatever space they're in, whatever body they're in.
I feel a sense of calm comes when that strength is evoked in a healthy way. Maybe it's sort of like if you're in a room and there's loud, you're with a group and you're singing loud or chanting loudly, and then there's the stopping and there's a resounding sound that it leaves behind, right? But that sound would not have been there had you not hummed or sung loudly. So to just ask the person to come to that calm is a pretty tall order. There's no bridge, really.
Yeah.
And and physically what happens is the breath is opened by our poses. So the resetting of the breath clock, the resetting of the diaphragm after you've contracted the body and released the body, the reset button happens on its own. And it's not the slap your face kind of meditate and suffer the rumination of an assault and the day nightmares that come to your head if you try to sit and ruminate in any way.
No, you're strengthening the neural pathways to that rumination because you've got a clear mind and you're focusing all your energy on it. You're being very attentive to it. So it's working against you, I think.
I was in a yin class a couple of, let's see, when was it? Oh, I guess it was actually about 5 years. 5 years after the assault, 5 years after I was assaulted, I was strong enough to go to yin classes. And it was with a lovely man, and really, really served me at that point. But a couple of weeks in a row, a woman set up a mat right next to me, and I was completely in my own zone, but because I'm a sort of amorphous body, I felt as though she was weeping. And the second week, she actually sat up and took a book from her knapsack and started reading and read through the rest of the class and just sat there. And my whole sensory knew that she was suffering from an assault or trauma, and that she had the misapprehension or the misteaching that to come to a yin class or go to yoga nidra or do meditation would calm her. And indeed, afterwards, I took a leap of faith, introduced myself, told her I wasn't trying to sell my work, but that I noticed that she'd been in pain and that I wanted to just share with her that, an introspective class with much silence doesn't work at all stages for us. And that from a clinical point of view, I wanted to share that with her, again, to normalize the circumstance. Anyway, I ended up sharing some of my work with her and then recommending to her the William Wentz Center for Loss and Healing, where she was able to see a therapist at a really good price. The point of what had happened for her was she had a history way back of early sexual assault. Her son reached the age that she was at that time, and the trigger just exploded. And again, when she went to the active, powerful, eyes open classes, she was okay. But she didn't understand why she wasn't okay in the yin class. And it was completely obvious, completely made sense.
I'm so glad you've related this story, because I'm sure that'll clarify for a lot of listeners who have these experiences and don't know why, or feel that there's something wrong with them, or how do I deal with this? Thank you.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to know. Yeah.
And that's not to say that weeping out of the blue as you do a yoga posture by yourself at home or in a class is a sign that you shouldn't be there. But she was really being tortured, and she didn't know this information. This information is super important for us to understand, like texture or color that an artist works with. You know, we have these choices within the yoga therapy and the yoga range of poses, and there's a reason we have these choices of ways of being in them. So when she activated her glutes, when she activated her quads, when her eyes were open, when she was emboldened through her movement, when she was breathing rhythmically with instruction, she had to be one with that moment in order to complete what she was being asked to do. But the introspection was literally a danger zone. And, you know, in the article, you may have noticed, I touch in very briefly into the Polyvagal Theory and what that has shared with us. And to be perfectly honest, I developed my training series and presented it to probably 3 different groups before one person who was a somatic practitioner came up to me during a break and said, "So that was really ventral vagal that you were doing, wasn't it?" I don't remember if I laughed or faked it that I knew what she was talking about, but I was already describing dorsal vagal and ventral vagal.
Stephen Porges' theory came out,
without knowing what
that was.
And the reason was because I, like what was happening next to me in the mat in this yin class, had experienced a dorsal vagal horror show after a yoga practice. I lost all use. I was alone. I was alone doing a wonderful practice the day after, or 2 days after the assault. And afterwards, my legs collapsed from under me. I fell to the floor. I was sobbing and choking, as in vomiting, and literally crawled to a phone to call a neighbor.
Wow.
And I did not know that was dorsal vagal. But it happened. I analyzed it and thought I was safe a second day doing a different type of practice, making sure I didn't do the same things that opened my chest, making me vulnerable, and making sure my husband was home in case. And the same thing happened. And so
Can you explain what happens with the vagal dorsal? Because I don't know this connection either. I mean, I read a little bit in the article, but I think it's interesting for listeners as well.
So the polyvagal theory helps us understand something much less black and white, much less narrow than the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, which are great tools to understand. The sympathetic being the fight or flight, the parasympathetic being the rest and digest aspects of our nervous system, right? So as we exhale, we drop into the parasympathetic. As we inhale,
we wake up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So this is why it's delicate what we tell somebody who is in a state of one thing or another, where we say reflexively, we say, take a deep breath in. That could be risky. They could be already hyperventilating. It might be they need to exhale slowly out.
This is what I do just out of prevention, but is it the case that asking people first to breathe out slowly prevents a trigger of a sympathetic nervous system, or not necessarily?
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Even in my normal classes, I just do it just in case, because you don't know who's walking in.
I think extending the exhalation is a pretty great idea. Yeah. If somebody is suffering from depression, you might want to go more even Steven with a breath, even inhale, even exhale, kind of rhythmic. But yeah, I was at the Women's March when you know who was elected president 4 years ago. And we were, this is in DC, 7 miles from my house, and we were like sardines squashed next to each other. And we were told to walk a certain direction to a gate to parade around the White House. And then we were told that gate is closed, no, go the other way. And what happened was a traffic jam.
Yeah.
And it was a little frightening. And a woman next to me said, I feel faint. And the man standing next to her said, take a deep breath. And I said, actually, if it's okay, lean on me. I've got you. Is it okay if I put my hands on your back and your shoulder? And she was very warm. Everybody was touching everybody, so you had to be okay. She was very warm with me and was fine with touch. So I helped ground her. And then we exhaled together.
Wow.
Yeah, because she was probably hyperventilating.
Yeah.
But back to the polyvagal. So this was our understanding, sympathetic, parasympathetic. The polyvagal helps us understand that within the parasympathetic nervous system, there are two branches. A primitive branch, the dorsal vagal, and a more contemporary human evolution of the ventral vagal.
Okay.
So dropping into the dorsal vagal, if you can picture what certain animals do when they come into stillness when they're in danger, certainly a tortoise retracting inward, not moving, and other animals that might freeze in order to not excite their enemy, their predator. Yeah. So we can drop into that in many forms. It can even be feeling shut down and not being able to speak, or finding, like you asked me a question and I'm suddenly
frozen. Yeah.
Frozen. Or in the beginning of my book, of 6 women in a cell when I talk about baby, which
you don't know what to say.
I'm happy to read from in a minute, but also that baby herself, the first woman I encountered in the jail cell, was frozen in front of me. So her body naturally went into the health of the dorsal vagal. And that's what happened to my legs and my body at that moment when I went into collapse. But if we can bring the body into ventral vagal by pressing our paws into a table or a shelf or the ground, and if we have a partner, and partnering is fine, if a partner lays their hands on top of ours, and even if you place one hand on top of your other back of hand and press that, you'll notice a shift through your system down into your belly, actually. That is it's that anchoring cord, right?
Yeah, this tethering that you were talking about.
The tethering. Yeah. And so if you can imagine in a dog pose, again, if the person was fine with touch, if you were in dog pose and somebody put the lip of a blanket under your heels, so your heels were not floating, but were on a surface, and a partner pressed your paws to the floor, and another partner pressed your ankles or your feet to the earth, and another partner geared your sacrum toward your heels and laid a hand on your upper back. If you can imagine this total body tethering, contact,
safety,
etc., that's like super ventral vagal to me, because you're alert, you're in charge, you're in power, but you've touched this deep place of safety. And every time we do this, including Fasti, because you've created closed chain when the listeners cross their forearms, even though my hands are open in space, I'm evoking closed chain. Through my forearms, through my back muscles, through my legs, through my feet.
That's what you meant with closed chain, because I was like, how can we have closed chain in all those? But yeah, when you activate every muscle, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So even pressing your hands out in front of you in Tadasana, instead of standing vulnerable in Tadasana, or even if you are standing in a normal Tadasana, if you imagine your palms are pressing towards water, the current of water, you'll feel your rhomboids and your latissimus dorsi kicking in immediately.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of Iyengar and I used to love it. And now I understand why, because I needed to feel empowered. Yeah. I did it for a long time, and then I just got too tight in the joints because I was too strong. I was too engaged.
And it's a yin yang, isn't it?
Yeah, you need to balance all. I love all the traditions now.
Yeah.
There was a point where I think most people get really into what they're doing, and that's the way. But then after a while you go, well, that is a good way for that.
But if you revisited the structural practices and instead evoked what you've learned since, and you, for example, using the floor, say you're in triangle pose, where there's great choice between surrender and just, stretching the bejesus out of your hamstrings, or, super tightening, right? There's a huge range of what you could do. But within that, what if from the earth, your feet drank up the nectar? And so, yes, so your arch is lifted. So the outer calf muscle, which sings right up into the knee muscles, right into the thigh and supports the gluteus medius, and that draws us towards our pelvic floor.
Yeah, and lifts up the whole spine. And
exactly. But so if you evoke it through a drinking.
This emotional embodied feeling. It is feeling that essence.
But it's structural too.
Of course.
It is, so they are one. They are one in their goodness, but we can end up, like you said, taking it to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Shira.
Yes.
I would love to read that little section I just said about baby, or another section, but I wonder if you could share with us something about your book, because I've been rabbiting on and I'm so excited and intrigued about your forthcoming book.
Thank you, Diana. I keep trying to drop that I'm writing a book in every podcast because I'm really excited too.
Well, actually, you've written a book.
Yeah, I've written a book, but it needs another 10,000 revisions.
And it's a beautiful book. It's really beautiful. It's really fresh and clearly comes from the wisdom of hard knocks and great study and skill. Yeah,
it's definitely been a lot of hard knocks. But it all started because I burnt out about 3-4 years ago here in the Netherlands. I was moving and I couldn't find a home. We couldn't stay in a permanent home because we'd come from Berlin. I think we moved 8 times in 2 years. So I was a bit exhausted and I burnt out. And I think I was already going through perimenopause, but I didn't know it. I didn't know what it was like, but I was gaining weight and pimples and brain fog. So through this whole emotional bump, I started working with chakras. I followed something from Shari Friedrichshain. So I followed just an online course, and it was then that I started to figure out that what was getting in my way was myself, obviously, but it was also the emotions and me not understanding what they meant and how to deal with them, and that they were part and parcel of being me, and that they were also teaching me or trying to teach me to take the right path for myself. But I didn't know what that was because I didn't understand what they were saying. So it just became a huge research project of each emotion and how it works physiologically. First, I was thinking they were thoughts affecting the body and causing these emotions, but then it became clear that it's a two-way stream. They work together. You can have emotions and that causes thoughts, and it can be the other way around. And then there's consciousness, which is involved, and our beliefs and our values and all these layers, the koshas again. And so the guidebook that I'd made for working, so I thought, okay, I'll make my own guidebook and my own course to work with emotions, something simple. But as I started writing this guidebook, it became 10 to 15 pages for each chakra, and I just couldn't stop writing. And as I wrote those things, I was like, okay, I want this to be for general readers, anyone who is interested in working with their emotions or needs this work. So then I had to explain what the koshas were and what energy was and what is prana and why is that even important to understand how we make these emotions, or what are these emotions and how is it connected to our purpose or sense of soul. So yes, it's become a whole project, and through this process, I think I mentioned it with the talk with Beth, was I grew so much out of it. I am a very impatient person. I like to get things done and then I move on to the next thing. Sometimes I leave things before they're finished. But with this, it felt so important that I couldn't leave it. And learning to be patient and waiting to get it right. And like me and Diana were talking about before, no one knows how many revisions we do. It's not like you just write this amazing book. You write a lot of crap too, and then you go through it many times. Yeah. So tell us about your books, because I've gotten 2 beautiful books now from Diana from this talk, and I couldn't stop reading this morning. I was like, I've got 15 minutes to read, and then it went to 45 minutes because I couldn't stop. It was so easy to read.
Oh, thank you. So I'll park my question for you in order to answer your question, but I'm just going to say what my question to you was about the Manomaya kosha. I'm curious because it sounds as though you have a fresh way of looking at that. So if you can get to answer that, that would be great. I'll just really quickly answer you.
Okay.
My two books are my two books are Six Women in a Cell, a story of sisterhood and survival after police assault. And it tells the story of the 5 women I shared a jail cell with for one very dramatic night. And through their stories, which I just didn't even notice, but naturally solicited as a practiced listener, I drew each of their stories out. And so I tell in one successive chapter after another, I tell their story, and from their story, I segue into a tidbit of my story until by the end of the book, when you read about the final woman who touched, well, they all touched me, but particularly really went into my bloodstream, Mud, you find out what really happened to me.
That's why you can't stop reading this book, listeners. You keep going, oh, now I get a little bit of Diana's story each time, just a little bit. It's so beautiful. Did you do that in the first time? Or you had
I always knew that I had to speak about baby, Alexa, Richmond, the social worker, and Mud. I had to speak them. I couldn't live in this isolation of my own movie in my own head and the people in my head and the associations that nobody else knew. I was terribly isolated by that information. So I always knew I had to tell my story through theirs. And then the other book, which was my second book, but the first one that I had the courage to publish, is a resource book, a really beautiful resource book that I don't have right in front of me, but this isn't video anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's very, very beautifully done. It's a square book with a beautiful cover, and every page is done beautifully with a lot of white space around it.
Yeah, it's very calming.
Yeah, exactly. And it's written for people who might have executive function problems due to a trauma. You know, we can't read densely when we're in a traumatic state. The words need to be easy on the page for us. And then the mudra drawings are very beautiful. The artist did a great job. So that book is really a love conversation from me to assault survivors. And it is meant to help anybody in an acute stage in ways that I mean, if I hadn't had tools, honestly, I don't know how I would have survived. And so this is a sharing that is meant to be at the now, at this moment right now, when you have nowhere to turn. So anyway, it's not necessarily always a heavy book. I don't mean to be that heavy about it, but my intention about it is extremely purposeful. And I've been really honored that some therapists, psychotherapists, as well as yoga therapists have found, a calling to pass it on to clients, because even a cousin of mine who was suffering from asthma, which creates anxiety, the panic that you can't breathe, instead of going to the ER, went into the last mudra, and it opened her breath, and it created strength, and it just reset the reset button. So those are my two recent passions.
Yeah. I haven't had a good look. Well, I have read about Baby and the 6 women in a cell and surviving assault. I just had to print this out, so I'm going to read this right now. It comes
thank you.
Book. Yeah, and it's like Diana said, the book is so peaceful. It's so easy to read, and there's space between the words and between the pages even. Yeah. So this is all true, but wait. In the meantime, something that shouldn't have happened, that in a fair and just world should not have happened, has happened. We protect our bodies against harm. We stay with the allies to ensure that. We stand by ourselves now at our most needed time. We let ourselves know this over and over again. We protect ourselves against further negativity of any kind, even against negative voices of self, blame, and shame. Here is a mudra, Fasti Mudra, that was ever so helpful to me when negativity came to me, whether from another person or from within myself. When I found it, I was in a bookstore and picked it up, a book on mudras. It jumped off the page and it was like a friend exploded into my damaged life. I used it often since. It strengthens me, low in the belly, deep in the back. But first, what is a mudra? Really, really beautiful, I think, because you started with this as well. And now we're ending with this. You asked about Manomaya Kosha. I think you're alluding to the fact that I say there's 2 aspects of mind which we don't speak to. Is that what you mean? The fresh look?
Just roll out, yes.
So for me, this only became obvious the last few months. I was writing, and then I realized, hang on, what they speak about, the hatha in yoga, not just the heart of the body, which is sun, and the mind moon, but the mind has active and passive. So, well, the passive is not just passive, it's creative, it's emotive, it's reflective, it's memory, it's everything that is grounding and that holds. But if we don't use that creative aspect, because we're so much in our logical mind, we have to think, we have to plan, we have to schedule, we have to create and produce, then our creative mind, this reflective, absorbing mind, starts to create other things. It needs an outlet, like dancing, like drawing, like writing. And if people don't have that, we start to ruminate and we start to just create stories in our head, because it needs, that imagination needs to be activated and used, engaged and expressed in some form, whatever form that is. Otherwise it becomes like a child that is neglected. It's the same. You just need to use and engage everything equally. So yeah, and it was only through writing and going through those thousands of revisions and rereading and then bringing it all into context, it was like, oh, that's the missing bit, because we have the left and right hemisphere and we know there's creative and there's logical, but there's not just the creative, it's also memory and emotion, feeling, perceiving within, the pratyahara. And so, yeah, I find that's a little bit that's missing maybe in the yoga texts that we usually turn to, like the Yoga Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. There's no talk about imagination, almost none. I think Patanjali, he talks one time about using, when we're attracted to something, we can use that attraction and bring it back in our imagination to keep the mind focused on something positive. So what's that called? Pratibhavana.
And I think that's the only time we talk about that aspect of mind.
This is very subtle and also very big.
Yeah.
What you're talking about.
Yeah, because we're missing something. And if we're missing something, that makes it the weakest link. And I think that's what we're missing in society as well. It's just that emotional, feeling, creative aspect.
I feel like what I try to hone into at the end of a yoga therapy session when I'm giving one, or when I'm giving one to myself, is to drop into the wisdom place where this kind of creativity, for want of a better word, this huge pond of movement and silt and water and animals and colors and radiance and all sorts of reflections happening in it. When we, at the end of a session, when we drop into that, the message from within oneself to the self might be the color green, right? And when we do that, or, it might be a word, or it might be, I don't know, all I can think of is I'm seeing myself at the beach with my dog when I was 8, so that is that space of where imagination and
reflection,
reflection, open door, open body, open psyche, feels so safe as to just, to know that it's housed and to just easily expand into a place that we usually might think of as nonsense, or you have too much imagination. But that touching of that base that you're talking about, I usually think of it as the wisdom space as Vijnana Maya Kosha. But I can see that it also gears right into Manomaya Kosha.
But as you're talking, I'm thinking, hey, maybe she's right, or she's alluding to something that maybe the left or the creative side of our brain, our right brain, is. So from the logical brain and the conscious brain, the right brain is maybe the subconscious brain, which is also where we dream. And maybe that's our connection to the Vijnana Maya Kosha.
Well, it's no coincidence that they are right next to each other, and we talk of the koshas as these layers, or these, 5 bodies, Pancha Maya Kosha, but
it's much more subtle.
But of course, it's, the listener can't see, but I'm crisscrossing my fingers in a weave, it's, of course, they're woven.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, as a scientific person would be thinking, well, maybe it's that, because, I tried to break it down for those people who are so practical and want to know everything and label it. I'm sometimes one of them too, trying to give everything a place just to make sense.
And to be clear, that place is our health. That space is our wholeness right there. And we can drop into that after a practice, for example, after the simple practices in that chart, in the article and in the back of my book, by then coming to some stillness, maybe we've emoted, maybe while we were doing Fasti Mudra and pulling up a resource with our eyes, we were weeping. Maybe not, maybe we were just feeling strong. The sky's the limit of what comes up. But when we finish and we just sit for a moment and drop in, our eyes can be open still as we drop into that wisdom place. We do not have to be in lotus with our eyes closed to go there. But I'm with you on the legitimizing of that space. And I really perceive it as our wholeness and our health when we touch it.
Definitely. And our strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Diana. This has been wonderful. Yeah. I really love meeting you. I hope we have more of these conversations.
I have so much more to say. And as do you.
I've got to end because otherwise it won't fit on.
Absolutely.
But
thank you.
We can definitely have conversations whenever. Just contact me because for me, I've got a lot of questions too.
Thank you for all that you're sharing with the world.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, really. Namaste.
Namaste.